Well, After Arclight is the penultimate track, and it's just under 8 minutes. It's the longest track on the album, so appropriately enough, it contains the word long in the title, The Long Awakening. You start it off acoustically, then you start to bring in, the tasteful layering of sounds we've been talking about. This has a cool ambiance to it, and a lot of interesting musical passages, and staying on the concept of Sacramento, the person it made me think of was Lyle Workman. It's his type of track.
Well, it's so weird that you say these things. It's amazing because he had done a song called The Morning Sun, Mourning, then SON, that I loved. It was just a beautiful song. And it reminded me, just of becoming something. The track really was just becoming this and becoming and blossoming. And oddly enough, that you said that, that was the template for me on this song, in as much as I wanted to do a song that blossomed. And this song is for my son. I had never written a song for Nate. He's now 18. And I always felt kind of guilty, like, I know all my other band guys, were all had written something, for their daughter, son, or whatever. And I wanted to, but I wanted it to be right when I did. I didn't want to force anything. And so I thought this is an opportunity to do this, because it's basically about parenthood. And the way it starts out, and again, this is heavily, heavily dependent on thematic development, because you have three notes, boom, boom, boom. And it starts that. So exactly that's the first thing you hear, and it's the last thing you hear. And that basically is symbolic for the three members of our family, Joey, me, and Nathaniel. And so that goes all the way through the song in one form or another, those three notes. And it starts out in the gestation period, where he's basically, and it starts out with the tempo. The loop is his the actual heartbeat that we got when Joey was pregnant. So I had saved that, and that's the paw, paw, paw thing that you hear in there. That's his actual heartbeat. And everything is kind of suspended and fluid at the beginning of it. And then is the birth, and you can hear this huge chord hit. And then now he's out, and it's the whole emotional, wave that hits you at childbirth. And then it goes in, and then the rhythm comes in and kicks in when he starts growing. And there's a part in here where it becomes darker, because of the angst of the adolescence and teenage years, where there's issues, and another part where it's the maternal, comforting area, all of this. And then it kind of goes all the way to the top where everything stops. And then Steve Porcaro does this beautiful touch on piano of him moving out, the moment that you move out of your parents' place, and that feeling of sadness of leaving that nest. And then the next part of it is the whole, the climax, where these things, again, with the melody, the tri-note melody structure, and as everything starts to enter in, and those are the complexities of life, and the guitar solo that follows that is my guiding light for him, hopefully, throughout all of these ever, growing complexities. He still remembers what he learned here, in the hopes that, he'll carry that light through him, not only me, but of his mother as well. And then at the end of that, it just stops, and it's basically the realization that we have an empty nest now, and we've done our job, but it's a very quiet house. And that's where Tadje Mikkelsen had come in from Norway, and had conducted the string section on this for me. So it's a very poignant song. It was hard for everybody to get through this without crying, because everybody was a father. Troy played drums on this Laketta, and it was hard for him to get through it, and we were constantly trying to steel ourselves so we could get a good take, because it really did affect us, the whole thing. So that's the long awakening is the child growing up and becoming an adult.
So much to say after hearing you say that. You can't miss the fact that 5 minutes in, there's an abrupt stop, and it takes a hard left into a piano feel.
Yeah.
You can't miss it, but now I know what it represents.
Yeah.
And then a couple minutes later, it takes a hard right turn into a string feel, or possibly volume pedal, which you just explained why that is the empty nest thing. So, and it's so funny, because when I mentioned Lyle, I sort of had a similar conversation with him about his track, The Great Race, how it had a lot of different sections and passages in it. And that's kind of what I was thinking of when I listened to The Long Awakening by you. Well, The Great Race is track 7 on his album Tabula Rasa. Guess what the next track after that is?
The Morning Sun.
Rising of the Morning Sun, it's called
Yep,
officially.
that's it. Rising of the Morning Sun, yes.
Now, your track is just under 8 minutes, and Rising of the Morning Sun is 9:33, so Lyle wins.
Okay. So probably took a longer solo than I did, you know. Yeah.
And just a little foreshadowing, I was speaking with Lyle recently, and he has a solo album coming out later this year. 2019 is a good year for guitar
Well, we're going to
albums.
get together. He wants to get together. He's actually flying over to Abbey Road the day after tomorrow to conduct an orchestra or to do orchestral stuff. So he said, when we get back, we're going to have a record release party, you and me, you know. So it's like, okay. You know, he's been so supportive the whole time. You know, he's a beautiful human being, and just you can't get better than Lyle. Yeah, and plus, just an incredibly consummate musician. Just one of the only guitar players I can really listen to for a long period of time and still be enthralled.
Yeah, that's how I feel about both of you guys. You're almost kind of like a Lennon and McCartney for me, like a sort of like a matching set. And he told me basically the same thing about doing the string session at Abbey Road. The reason I dropped him a line was because of you. I said, have you heard Mark's new album yet? He said, no, but I'm really looking forward to hearing his masterpiece, but I'm going to Abbey Road to record the strings. And of course, you know, it doesn't surprise me too much that you guys influence each other, but the fact that he was a direct influence on this one, and it's the only one I'd written in my notes. You know, I'd written his name down. It's just this whole Mark and Lyle and I did not get together before this podcast, ladies and gentlemen.
It's just like I said, every one of these you've hit out of the park. I'm very impressed, dude. Really impressed.
Well, thanks. Well, thanks, man.
Yeah.
Well, we have one more track to discuss, but before we do that, let's talk about July 3rd, 2019. You got a new album being released. You got a new website being launched. You've got an instructional book coming out. Topping all that off, it's also your birthday. So way to pile on, man.
That's pretty well. It's been 25 years. I just decided to do it all in one day, you know.
Do it all in one day. I want to make sure and get this out there. The old web address was marcbonilla.com. The new one is marcbonillamusic.com. Not too hard to figure that one out, but it's important, particularly because initially this album is going to be exclusive to that website. It will literally be the only place you can get it initially. So if you go to marcbonilla.com and there's nothing there, or if you go to Amazon and it's not there, don't freak out about that. Is the plan to eventually release it to all the usual outlets?
Yeah, I will. Yeah, just right now, I just kind of want to have control of it because I don't know. You know, I don't know if I've ordered too little, too many. I don't know. I'm just trying to get a read for it, and it's hard to know how many want are going to want signed copies, how many are going to want downloads. You know, because it's a different world now. So I want to keep a little bit more of the inventory stock of how things are going to go, and plus I don't want to give 30 to 60% to somebody that didn't have anything to do with the album.
Good point. And to keep bringing up Lyle Workman, he tossed it out to his fans, in a sort of public thread. Should I even make any CDs? How many should I make? Just to get everybody's feedback, because it's sort of a different world right now. If everybody does a download, you end up with a bunch of discs, and there's still an advantage to doing the discs. We won't get into all the reasons now, but Lyle, as we've said, has his own solo album coming out, and we totally understand. I think it's good for you to retain control of that in the beginning and sort of be exclusive.
Well, I had other labels that wanted to release it, but I just, I'm too tired of getting these royalty checks from these record companies for 70 cents when I know I sold more than one record. So it's like, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. I want to have the control of it, so I know. And plus, if there's anything that the fans want or anything, like, hey, can you do this for me? I'll be able to put downloads up there. Like, here, if you buy this, I'm going to give you some bonus tracks here, something you might not have heard, whatever. I just be a little bit more in tune with the public. Really, I think it's better.
The main thing the record companies used to offer was distribution. The physical. Pressing of the vinyl albums, the trucks, they get it to the store where people walk in and buy the physical product. We can create our own physical products now or sell our products without a physical product, so it's a whole different thing. So you're being smart about it, I would say. But let's talk about your book. What's the story there?
Well, the idea had been kind of going around in my head for years about writing a book on just the staple knowledge of guitar playing. And this will vary from seasoned player to seasoned player, whatever, one approach or one observation. This is the way it worked for me. And these are discoveries that I've made along the line of playing with other people, keep my mouth shut, listening to things, and I would write stuff down that would occur to me, and then also in teaching, and when you teach, you channel just like you do when you play. And so I'd find things coming out of my mouth that I had no idea, I was like, hey, I like that. Hold on a second. I'd write it down. Because I would think of a metaphor, analogy that actually really fit well, and they were able to understand, whoever it was. So after several years of this, I decided, okay, I'm going to put all these together. I'm going to put, I'm just going to scale back on the knowledge that you need, because there's so much theory out there that you don't need. Learning about modes. You don't need modes. All you need is like one scale, two scales, and you can play all that stuff. It just depends on how you want to look at it. So what you're doing is I'm trying to get these guys and girls to clean out the closet, all the clothes that they don't wear, and just here's the stuff that you will wear, and that way it's easier to get to it, and you're the smoothness of your playing, and you'll get that out of the way, so that what you can then do is perform it, not just play it. I mean, it's one thing to have those tools, and you definitely need the tools in order to play. But at some point, you have to stop thinking about it, and in order to stop thinking about it, it has to be very simple. And so, what the book is, it gets heady in there, from time to time, but only for a second, because I've taken great pains in trying to make sure that there's enough examples and things to really get across the idea of how to play. And in the back of the book is stuff on the band situation, playing in bands, things that you never find in videos. They never talk about. They never talk about, getting along with people. How, if you have a keyboard player that's doing this, how to work around them. All of these things that you just acquire by doing, not by going to school to learn. As good as theory is and all of that, there's a practical amount of it that's good. But it's kind of like when all of us got our driver's license. How good of a driver when you the first day you got it? Well, I can drive, but that doesn't mean that you're a good driver. You need to take time for you get the jerks that are running running red lights. Okay, so these guys are going to red lights. These guys are not going to they're talking on their phone. You learn about all of the different hazards, and that's when you become a good driver, is after a few flight years, after driving on the road for a while. So what's in this book is that type of stuff, getting street knowledge basically on how to play, and the things that are important, the things to look for, the things to feel, and to trust the muses and all that stuff. It's all in here. So that's, it's about 130 pages. And I've also got suggested listening. I've got 50 tracks in the back that are linked to the website, so you can go there and listen to the songs. And I've put down the things to listen for on these great tracks, so you can hear them in practice. So, and so there's a lot of different things in here but it's basically to cover every aspect that you might encounter. And it's really kind of a synopsis of everything that I've learned in the past however many years I've been doing this, which is, considerable. So that's what it's about. It's called Balance of Power is what it's called.
Now, is it a physical book, a download, or both?
It's a download right now. And at some point I will probably, you can download it. You can go to Kinko's and punch it, and for like $7, and you could have a book. It's made to be used as a book as well. So you can download it and they'll print it out for you. The other way, you can have it on your phone or whatever, whenever you're, wherever you're at, and be able to look at it that way. So I felt it was better to give them that option, that if you want to print it out, that's fine. But this way, it's a lot more portable, and you can take it wherever you want.
Well, considering your resume, that goes a long way, because a lot of times you'll see a book of this nature and the author will be somebody nobody's ever heard of, But, a guy like you, the gigs you've had and the knowledge, and if they just hear you play guitar in any one thing, they'll know. A lot of those books are sort of done by never was type people.
They're very academic, and they don't get into the performing on the guitar. They get into the playing and the application of the scales and the chords and all that. And yeah, that's important, but you got to get past that. Once you have that down, you have to understand what techniques you can use to get your ideas across, so that you're now performing the songs. You're not just playing the songs. Yeah. You're using your emotional state to govern those colors and the dynamics of all that stuff. So that's what's important.
Well, it's interesting, as listeners know, we recently had Carmine Appice on the show, and he wrote a book for drummers in the early 70s that he said it was almost like having another number one song for him in terms of his revenue and for his influence in the drumming community. The fact that he's just like you, he saw the books in the stores were very dry and unhelpful. And, he said, well, let me do it right. And of course, prior to him, we had Carol Kay on the show. And she did the same thing for bass. She just wrote a great instructional that, a lot of famous bass players said they went through Carol's books, and a lot of famous drummers said they went through Carmine's. And now we have Marc Bonilla finishing it off with guitar. So
it'll allow you to inject your own personality into your playing, and that's what's important because no one, if you're going to be good, do it on your own terms. In other words, don't try and sound like anybody else. And that's increasingly difficult these days because if you notice when we were growing up in the 70s, right, you knew who was playing guitar. It didn't matter if you knew the tune. You could tell by the tone. You could tell by, the touch and all of that stuff. Nowadays, I find it much more difficult because you have all the plugins that everybody has the same presets for it. So you got the same tone. And, there isn't a whole lot of variation out there. And I think that that's what's important for guitar players is to find your own mental thumbprint. Right. And the best thing to do is to be yourself. That's the way you carve a niche in the world so that anybody that will hear, oh, that's a so-and-so. So how do you know that? Because they're playing like themselves, not like anybody else. And so that's what's important. That's what's in this book, trying to get you guys to be individuals. That's what counts.
Let's do you think of a signature sound like Eddie Van Halen or Carlos Santana or Brian May.
Yeah.
Or certain people you always know it's them. You're right. There's less of that for sure.
Yeah, but way less.
Well, good. It's nice. I definitely wanted to mention that so it didn't get overshadowed by the music, but that's an important thing too. Well, speaking of the music, the track that closes the album is also the track that's going to close the podcast. Very beautiful and emotional composition with one of those timeless melodies. Why don't you talk us through Our Winter Love?
Well, Our Winter Love was a song that was originally, or I heard it originally in the 1960s. My brother Tom and I used to hang out in the bedroom. We had a very small little room in Molna Creek. And, during the summer, we have a little portable fan up on the wall trying to cool us off with its oscillation. And we'd have the windows open and we had a transistor radio going on. And this tune was done by Bill Purcell. It was an instrumental tune. It was a gorgeous tune, very haunting. And we used to play it over and over again. I had a little 45 RCA turntable that I still have, as a matter of fact, and that you actually hear at the beginning of this tune, the kind where the platter would come down and slam down on the platter, which is terrible for vinyl. And and you hear the record come over and the needle hit, and you can hear all the wonderful vinyl popping and the scratching and going on. And then I've kind of put a guitar part in there that sounds like it was back in that day. And then you hear a strike of thunder, very, very mellow strike of thunder, and then it opens up into modern day. And the vinyl scratching morphosizes into rain. And then the track starts from there. And like I said before, and I've used a one of the verses, I've used a baritone guitar with tremolo, which is something that was used often back then. If you listen to Glenn Campbell's stuff, like on Galveston and Wichita Lineman and Jack Nitsky's version of the Lonely Surfer. This is great sound. And it's very much like the sound that David got in for Twin Peaks. If you listen to the solo on the beginning of that Angelo Badalamenti, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, got Lynch's version of that. So it's a beautiful tone that kind of evokes a nostalgicness. And then after that comes in the introduction of auto harps and the secondary melody. And then it goes from there. And again, like what I had mentioned before, I think this song, I did this cover in a manner of that I was trying to impart the emotions I was feeling when I listened to the original. When you listen to the original, everybody's going to have a different feeling of it. What this was a portraiture of how I felt when I heard the song. And so it is the song, but it's a lot more emotional for me. So it kind of played it big on emotion on this particular one.
Yeah, well, it comes across. There's a very high sort of operatic note. It sounds like a female voice, but it could also be a guitar or a keyboard effect.
No, it's a female voice in there, because that's a lot of times, and it's the same as in Westwood. It's that high operatic thing was so haunting, and I
Right.
tried to make it, and I tried to make the guitar parts like that. And I got a nice compliment from Bill Champlin, who called after he heard the album, and he was really, really very, very enthusiastic about it. And he said, sometimes I didn't know if I was listening to a voice or I was listening to your guitar,
That's why I asked. Yeah. And, I'm going to make a correction because I said earlier that the final segue on the album was the guitar lesson. But since you just said that needle drop at the
Yeah,
beginning of this,
it's a segue, but yeah, it
I'm
is.
I'm counting it as a segue because it's another one of those personal touches. And although we already went down this tangent, just naturally it came up. When I hear that vinyl needle drop, our generation was raised on vinyl.
Yeah.
Never mind CDs and digital downloads. We didn't have the internet, kiddies.
Right.
Atari was the height of technology.
Well, and the thing that I think is missing, and I'm kind of glad now that vinyl is making a comeback. And the thing that we miss on CDs, and unfortunately even more so when you have downloads where you're just downloading pieces, it's kind of like downloading slides of a film. You're not seeing the whole film for what it's intended to be shown as, is you're losing the album concept.
Mm-hmm.
For vinyl, you had a 2-act play. You had the first tune, which was always, you always thought, okay, man, we're going to lead off with something cool. And the second tune was usually strong, usually the hit. And then you had something, let's say if it was 10 tracks on the album, you had the 5th track that ended side 1 was a great piece too. And then it kind of like created this anticipation, like what does side 2 hold? And then you'd have to get up and you'd have to go over there and you'd have to take the needle off, turn it over, put it back down. You'd set the needle back down on it. Okay, now we're renewed. And what's it going to be like? And then side 2 would start. And it would be something really cool. And then, of course, the end song was always, amazing. So you had 1, 2, 5, 6, and 10 were those important spots on the album. But the deep cuts in between were often the ones that grew on you. So with albums, there's a flow and an ebb that goes with one track to another. At least there is on this one, where they're meant to be listened to in series, not pulled apart. Very much like a Sgt. Pepper or a Pink Floyd. Not that I'm putting myself in that category, but I'm just saying those are shining principles of those types of albums that you really do need to listen to them in a series. And what's interesting is if you think about that, you got a tune like let's say the White Album, and you hear a particular song on there, you already are anticipating the next song because this one's finishing, but Helter Skelter's coming right up, and that the sound of the last one going into that one. It's the same thing with Little Help from My Friends. You're going to hear that Lowry organ coming in for Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. You're prepping already for the next chapter. And that's what's great about concept albums, or just really albums in general, that there's a reasoning behind the sequence. It's for you to tell a good narrative story and to give your emotional balance, or give emotional balance rather, all the way through, so that you're experiencing different colors from one to the other. And that's what it is. It's like a well-balanced meal, where you have one thing that clears the palate, and then that wine that tastes good with that type of pasta, all of that stuff matters. So you're really kind of trying to enjoy a gourmet meal. And that's what albums always did for me.
Yeah, I completely agree. And to add to that, really sequencing could make or break an album in those days.
Sure.
If you screwed it up, people go, track 7 might be great, but no one's going to get to it.
That's right.
Because you ruined it. And that's sort of, whether it was conscious on your part or not, that's sort of ingenious about your segues, because your segues are not tacked to the beginning of the track they go with. They're tacked to the end of the preceding track. So if somebody just grabs track 2, track 7, and track 11 off Celluloid Debris, they're going to have these little audio clips that don't lead into anything. You have to have the next track to make the one continuous listening experience.
Well, that's why I'm not offering this on the web nor on Amazon as singular tracks. It's not meant to be listened to that way. I mean, you can listen to it later that way if you want, but it's to be listened to as a whole. That's was the reason it was conceived. It's for that. It's a whole journey, not just snippets of a journey.
Okay, well, cool. Well, again, I appreciate you sending me all the tracks in advance. I'm also planning to buy the album on July 3rd so I can have all the goodies, all the extras, and I encourage our listeners to do the same. I mean, it's the guy's birthday, for crying out loud. You pretty much owe it to him. He's a shrewd guy.
It wasn't intended that way. It was just like, I think I'm going to be done with the website by now, Right. And so I just said, well, we'll do it on the 3rd. And so that's your birthday, isn't it? Oh yeah, that's right. Oh, what the hell? It wasn't intentional. It just happened to be pointed out that was. I was too involved with designing this website. So.
Right on. And as much music as you guys heard today, there's plenty more that you still haven't heard. The ones I didn't play are equally as impressive. There literally isn't a weak moment on it. You know, the guy took 25 years to write it, so there better not be, right? But no, I encourage everybody to experience it for yourselves. You know, there's so many insights people have into your album now. It's deceptively complex. Let me say that. It's like, you know, if the stuff that if the extra ear candy and ideas weren't in there, you would notice, but you might not realize it. Let me put it that way too.
There's the one thing I really have to mention is that Ryan Green, it did such an amazing job mixing this record. It was not an easy record to mix, and it would have struck fear into the hearts of most mixing engineers because of the complexity of the tracks and all of that. And he came in here, and you know, he's a good friend, and just came in and gave everything he had for it, and just got those parts sounding just beautiful. And that's why it doesn't sound cluttered at all, and that's why so much of that stuff has to do with his brilliant mixing. And he said, you know, I said, well, I'm really happy with this. It's the guitar instrumental. He says, Mark, it's actually, I got to tell you, it's not a guitar instrumental album. It's an instrumental album.
Right.
You know, and I kind of thought about that for a minute and went, wow, maybe it is. Yeah. You know, he says, there's parts in here. This is all. It doesn't have that. He says as much. It's primarily guitar, but it doesn't have anything to do with the guitar. It's the composition. It's all of that other stuff. You know, and. So I think he was right, you know, in that respect. This was done, you know, again, the guitar was like an orchestra, and we were treating it as a servant to the composition, you know, and that's what I think we have. That's why I think it may be a little bit different than most of them.
Yeah, he was the right man for the job. And as I said earlier, you know, I think of you as a composer first and an instrumentalist second, and that is definitely something that would benefit you. You know, I would never talk bad about other players, and I certainly wouldn't intend to, but I'll just make the general comment. You know, there are a lot of players that have a lot of technical ability, but to make a food analogy, I think they're serving up a lot of empty calories. You know, they don't have that compositional sense. They don't have that. I remember Carlos Santana said that about Jimmy Page. You know, a lot of people criticize Jimmy Page for playing sloppy and this and that, but Jimmy, he composed a Rain song and Stairway to Heaven. You know, he had that element, you know, that Carlos Santana was envious of. So
yes, that's true. It's very true. The technical ability is not. I mean, I think these days it's overemphasized, and again, it doesn't have anything to do with telling a story. If that's all you're doing is running around the track really fast, okay, there's the same bench, there's the same lemonade stand, there's the same light pole. How about you go in a straight line and slow down a little bit and enjoy the scenery and the change of topography? That's what makes it different. That's what makes it progress, not going around in a circle on every song. I feel like too many people are just reciting the alphabet and not taking the words and actually spelling anything with them. They're just going A, B, C, D, you know, it's not telling a story.
I would tell people, go find a video of Tommy Emmanuel playing guitar, and you'll notice he's smiling while he plays.
Yeah.
Then go find a video of somebody playing something really difficult and see if they're smiling while they play.
Yeah.
Or if they're just all stressed about not screwing it up. That's not what the fun of music is.
It's not. Then it's a job, you know, and it's like, I mean, there's a time and a place for all of it. But it's all a question, as the Moody Blues always said, a question of balance. It was just, you know, you have to have a balance in everything in life. And what art is a reflection of life. And so well-balanced art reflects well-balanced life. Even if it's dark for 1 minute and there's light for another, eventually when you get to the end of the story, it's a well-balanced story. And that's what you want.
Well summarized. Just one last question. Are you going to be able to bring any of this music to a live setting?
I certainly hope so. Yes, I have the guys already lined up that want to do it. So I think, that's my next thing is to get this all to work live, and I will probably be doing some shows. So yes, I really do look forward to bringing this out to the public because it's about time.
Well, Mark, on behalf of my listeners and myself, you know, thanks for sharing your music, your stories, and your insights with us. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and of course, you're welcome back anytime.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you so much for doing all your homework, even if it was just 24 hours in advance. You live on a plane a bit different from most other interviewers, so your listeners are lucky to have you, and God bless you, man.
I appreciate that, and as you know from the off-the-record stuff, And the additional factor of my kids being in the house for summer vacation, makes it hard to do your homework when they keep
It's all good, man. It's all good, man. And one of these days they're not going to be in there, and then that resounding silence you're going to miss. You're going to miss them coming in and knocking, going, "Daddy, you ready?" That's what the long awakening was all about.
I won't miss it too much because I've recorded a lot of it, and I can just not because I wanted to.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, awesome. Well, everybody, as promised, from his amazing new album, Celluloid Debris, this is track 11. It's called Our Winter Love. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and we'll see you next time.
message. You don't have to play this album backwards. Just get a big knife and hack your parents' head off. No, I'm just kidding. Here comes the next song.